go on. And even in the church, the reason being that people from different backgrounds and social strata, and who are sometimes brought up in completely different cultures, live and work together for a common purpose. Once the purpose is common, it can work well. Once the purpose is decided, because we work in such a situation that we have to have a goal for being in that community, and the goal must always be our attachment to the principles of Jesus Christ. This week we studied Joshua 22 and the challenge that arose from a great misunderstanding among the people, which almost ended up in a war between the tribes. Because when Israel was coming out of Egypt, when they got on the other side of the Jordan, getting ready to cross the Jordan, the Reubenites, guardians, and half the tribe of Manasseh, they owned a lot of livestock. They had a lot of animals. So they asked Moses if it was okay for them to have this part of the land for their inheritance. They wanted to stay in this side of the Jordan because it favors them well with their livestock. Moses agreed, but on condition. The condition is simple. All of us together fought for the land you are looking for, to defeat Sihon and Og. So it would be fair if they all go with them to the other side of Jordan to fight, so the other people can also get the land, their inheritance. So that was what happened. And they went. They agreed to leave their families, their wives, their children, and their animals on this side of the Jordan and cross over with the other 9.5 tribes and fight wars until they win and got the lands distributed. It wasn't a few days. It took 6 to 7 years of this work, separated from their wives and children. Now, the importance of unity of a nation and of that land. The time they spent away from their families was a sacrifice. And there were conflicts. They are fighting wars. They could die. But love and the purpose of serving the Lord was able to overshadow the challenges, because they're doing it as if they were working for the Lord. So we see in Ephesians 6 verse 7, the Bible says, with good will, doing service as to the Lord and not to man. They were not doing this for their fellow men. They were doing it for God. It is God who promised to give the land. Colossians 3:23, the Bible reads, and whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to God and not unto man. The lesson here is saying that in everyday life, we often face challenges and difficulties that can easily discourage us and make us want to give up the fight. That's easy. at times to do. Yet, we can call upon the power of the Lord, who promises to be with us and enable us to do what he asks us to do. If we keep our high calling before us, we can be motivated to press on ahead despite the inevitable challenges and discouragements that are part of our fallen existence here. On Monday, the story turns different from Joshua 22, 9 to 20. When the Reubenites were returning, they felt among themselves that they need to set up a memorial which would link the two sides together. So they decided to build an altar, and they built a very big altar. But rumor went out very quickly that the altar that was being built was a rebellion against God. So when the other side heard the rumor, remembering what happened at Baal Peor, when the people went a-whoring with the Moabites, and they remembered Achan, how one man's sin was able to affect the whole nation. 36 of them died in the battle with Ai because of Achan. They decided to take an action, a positive action. If they were going to fight, they will fight and stop these people's rebellion from spreading onto all of them. So they sent a delegation. They sent a delegation to the Reubenites, headed by Phinehas, to go and inquire what were they doing from the rumors that they heard. If it was a rebellion, they were coming to fight. So the Reubenites listened to the accusations. There was a memorial there already. Joshua, when they were crossing, had them carry stones and laid the stones there as a memorial. So this altar is kind of questionable, that they were doing this for the same purpose. The question of the ensuing story is whether the tribes on the east side of the river can be seen as Israelites. They don't want their children to say, we are not part of the sons of Jacob, because already they started calling them the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, but they call the people on the west side Israelites. So there was a little dichotomy showing up. What was the problem? Lack of consultation with Joshua, Eleazar, or the tribal leaders that created room for misunderstanding that potentially can lead to terrible conflict. If they had consulted with leadership that, hey, this is what we are planning to do, we are planning to erect an altar, then that could have spread among the whole tribes that something like this was going to happen. Never get up on your own and make major decisions in any church or in any organization. Consult with leadership so everybody can be aware of what you are doing. No man is an island, and no group of people, 3 or 4 people, should get up in a church setting and decide to do something major without informing the whole church. You know, experience is supposed to advise, and experience advised them. What happened at Baal Peor when they went after the women of Moab? Even Phinehas, in a meeting when they were praying for God's intervention, saw an Israelite man pick up a Moabite woman and run with the woman into a tent, defying what they were doing, praying for God's. So he took a javelin in his hands and followed them into the tent and pierced them through. That stopped the wrath of God. So they remembered Phinehas as a leader. This thing haunted them while they were there. They remember Achan also. So the examples of Achan and Baal Peor serve as precedents, one for treachery, the other for rebellion. They also express the fear of the 9.5 tribes that the act of building an unauthorized altar will lead to apostasy, idolatry, and immorality, which will incur the wrath of the Lord upon the entire nation of Israel. Consult before you act. Let all your leaders be aware of your intentions so that you are not misjudged by your godly actions misinterpreted. Wednesday we found a gentle answer. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. Reubenites and Gadians listened quietly to the accusations. They waited and heard all what their concern was. And then they responded. They responded by calling upon the Lord. The opening sentence of the defense is a string of divine names attributed to Israel's God. El, Elohim, Yahweh. It is repeated twice with a growing force as it becomes a solemn oath in order to dispel the doubts and false accusations that almost led to a civil war in Israel. They are strongly convinced that God fully knows and understands the situation. The 2.5 tribes also recognize their accountability before the Lord by calling him to take vengeance. If they are guilty, God knows, and they allow God to take vengeance on them in what the people are accusing them of. That is God to intervene. Thus, building the altar is not evidence of apostasy, as has been supposed. Actually, the contrary is true. They have acted out of fear of the Lord, just as the Western tribes did. The true basis of Israel's unity is not geographic or physical extent of the inheritance, but their spiritual allegiance to the requirements of the Lord. Spiritual allegiance focuses unity, not the location. So people can stay in the same room and not be talking. But if even miles away from each other, but they are connected spiritually, holding on to God. Their unity can never falter. The genuine concern of the tribes on the west side of the river also is revealed in their authentic joy as the innocence of the tribes on the east is ascertained. Instead of feeling defeated by the arguments of their brothers, they show sincere happiness that their suspicions turn out to be wrong. Civil war in Israel was avoided, the unity of the nation preserved. Do you understand? It wasn't like I defeated you. No. It's like we are together. And our being together is more important. It's not like somebody has won and somebody has lost. No. The conflict has been resolved. How do we resolve conflict in our individual lives? Joshua gave us insight into that. Conflict resolution. First, we realize that if the Reubenites and half the tribe, if they had consulted, if they had only consulted with the leadership before making serious decision like building an altar unto the Lord, if they had only consulted, the problem that we are seeing today will never have happened. It will never happen. The story of Joshua 22 has several principles of communication that can apply to everyday human relationships in the family, in the church, and in the community. Number one, when things go wrong or seem to go wrong, the best thing to do is to communicate instead of suppressing our observations until they explode. Communicate. Some people are used to holding things in until they want to explode and no pleasant words come out. It is good for God's people not to remain indifferent when problems seems to arise. Of course, had the Transjordanian tribes communicated their intent of building an altar, the whole issue could have been avoided. Because they didn't consult, it rose suspicion, and suspicion, if it is not squashed immediately, creates problem. Number two, even if one is convinced about their judgment, do not jump to hasty conclusions. Always communicate and find the meaning, the reason why something has occurred. The West Jordan tribes were quick to believe the rumor that reached their ears and to draw the false conclusion that the East Jordan tribes already had apostatized. It was only because the two groups met that the conflict was resolved. Hasty conclusions must be avoided in our homes. Even something looks suspicious. Hasty conclusions must be avoided. There was a story told of a man who had a job out of town and had to go far away. He left his wife and traveled. There was no communication. The man worked for 20 years and returned home. But he got home late at night. When he looked through the window, he saw a man sitting there with his wife talking. He wanted to react, but then he held himself. He wanted to kill both of them, but he controlled his temper and waited, slept in the kitchen, waited till the morning to come and talk to his wife. In the morning, when he opened the door to speak to the wife, they were so happy together. And the wife introduced the man that he saw. He said, when they left, I was pregnant. The last encounter we had before you left. And I had this son. Today he's 20 years old. For that's how long you have been gone. So this man you saw is your son. If he had just reacted and killed both of them, he would have killed his wife and son. Patience must prevail. Good communication. Talk about the real or perceived problems before you act on your conclusions. Do not jump to conclusions without talking. Talking. Face to face is better. Be willing to make a sacrifice in order to achieve unity. The West Jordan tribes were willing to give up part of their allotment to accommodate the other tribes. It being on the other side of the Jordan was the cause of their assumed apostasy. 5. When accused falsely or rightly, give a gentle answer that turns away wrath. To answer an accusation with a counter-accusation will never lead to peace. Try to understand before attempting to be understood. And sometimes you need to wait for the heat to cool down before you explain yourself. Because in the heat of issues, people act unintelligibly, and it creates more problem than can be solved. A gentle answer turns away wrath. Rejoice when the truth is found out, not because somebody has won or somebody has lost, no. Because there is peace and we can enjoy the peace together as a family. That should be our focus when it comes to coming together to solve a problem through communication and accommodation and sacrifice. We need to do all three. Accommodate, be patient, and be willing to sacrifice so that peace can prevail instead of wrath. Had the eastern tribes apostatized, the people of Israel would have applied the requirement of the covenant. Stop apostasy. Unity can never be an argument to water down truth or give up on biblical principles. Wrong must be corrected. If biblical principles are affected, you cannot, because of unity, wash it aside. No. discipline must prevail. However, church discipline should always be the last and not the first result. After attempts at reconciliation and pastoral assistance based on God's word have failed, how different would our churches look if these simple principles were consistently applied? Ellen White added some things. Even under false accusation, those who are in the right can afford to be calm and considerate. God is acquainted with all that is misunderstood and misinterpreted by men. And we can safely leave our case in the hands of God. He will as surely vindicate the cause of those who put their trust in him as he searched out the guilt of Achan. Those who are actuated by the Spirit of Christ will possess that charity which suffers long and is kind. From Patriarchs and Prophets, page 519 and 520, Ellen White wrote, "It is the will of God that union and brotherly love should exist among his people. The prayer of Christ just before his crucifixion was that his disciples might be one as he is one with the Father, that the world might believe that God has sent him, Jesus, into our world." This most touching and wonderful prayer reaches down the ages, even to our day, for his words were, "Neither pray I for these alone, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word." John 17:20. While we are not to sacrifice one principle of truth, it should be our constant aim to reach this state of unity. May the Lord bless us as we study. This is 11. We have 12 and 13, and this quarter will be over. May the Lord bless you as you study and apply what you learn to your daily lives. Is our prayer.